Hey everyone, Daniel here. Hope you guys are doing wonderful. So today I wanted to do this really cool video. Basically, I was asked several times to talk about how did I get into mountain biking. And well, of course, you know, it's winter season. So right now I'm not cycling, or at least I'm not mountain biking due to the fact that we're off season and the winter season is not officially started. So I decided I'll take a few minutes and tell you guys about my history around mountain biking and how I got involved into mountain biking. So it all started way back, I would say around 1977. Yes, you did hear that right. So I started off-roading, doing some off-road bicycle around 1977 is when I had my first off-road bicycle. Now, what were those at the time? The mountain bikes were not out just yet. They came out a little bit later. But essentially, in 77, I had, the summer of 77, I had this motocross type of bicycle, but with no motor, but it had front suspension, rear suspension. I believe it was like the HR5 motocross type of bike. So I ran that for like 2 summers, and of course it was an off-road bike. So I started going off-road, spending time in the trails and the bushes, and having the time of my life, really. So those were like my first few steps into off-road cycling. Then I did that for about 2 summers. So 77, 78, those are the summers that I ran that motocross, and I learned to jump. I learned to bunny hop. I've learned to do all those little things on that type of bike. And I would, you know, jump anything I could, like sidewalks and tables, anything I could jump on and around, I would actually take that bike and do it. So I really enjoyed the experience. So I had that bike for about 2 summers. Then in 79 or about, summer of 79 is when I had my first BMX. So my parents had bought me at my birthday a leader type of BMX from a big box store, Canadian Tire or something like that, for a couple $100. And, you know, I started going to the local track and having some fun with that. Now, I kept that bike for about, I would say for the first summer. So the first summer of 79, I rode that bike to the local tracks. I did a couple races and I had a lot of fun, and decided throughout the winter to kind of like approach some of the bike shops, some of the local bike shops, and kind of introduce myself. And one thing led to another. I found some sponsors, and by the next summer, I had a mongoose paid bike by the local bike shop to actually start racing. So that BMX was actually pretty cool. It was the mongoose. Oh my God, the name, I don't remember what was the name of it particularly, Moto Mag or something like that. And it had like these 24-inch wheels with plastic rims. And they were like these rock solid rims. I mean, you couldn't break them. You couldn't like bend them or anything like that. They were like this one piece, a little bit like a mag type of thing. It had paddings on the handlebars, on the bike itself. And that was like my first real race bike type thing. That was about summer of 1980. The mountain bikes per se, as we know them today, came out in 1979 or so. Which at that time, I mean, the BMX was still that mountain bike type of thing. It was actually an off-road bicycle, just so we're clear. They were not called mountain bikes, they were BMX, but they're known as off-road bicycles, right? So I've raced those for about 2 years. Even more than that, about 5 years total. And slowly got into, you know, very basic mountain biking, would race BMX. So, you know, with time, I would say from 80 to about 1985, I raced BMX, like kind of like nonstop every summer, every weekend. I would go everywhere in Canada, like some of the local shops, the local tracks in Quebec. I would go in Ontario, and all sorts of places around Canada to race, and a couple of places also in the US to race again. Now, I did that for about 5 years, like full-blown off-road racing. Really liked it as a person, but came to the realization that racing was not for me, truly. So after 5 years of racing BMX and struggling to have sponsors and everything around it and kind of like make a living out of it, after a few years, I realized that I will not be doing a living racing bicycles. So what I decided from that point on is I decided to start cycling, but just for the fun and the pleasure of cycling. So I got into all sorts of cycling, including at that time is where 1979, 1980 is when the mountain bike first came out, the real mountain bikes as we know them, with 2-inch, 2.5-inch tires and all that. So slowly as I was getting out of BMX racing, I went to a local shop and I bought myself not a BMX, but a real mountain bike. And slowly I started letting go to the BMX and started riding a lot more of the mountain bikes now that we had mountain bikes and we could actually go off-road with those bikes at the same time as road riding and all. So that was really, really cool. So I would say around 1985, 86 is when I really, although for the first few years from 79, 80 to 85, I would have some mountain bikes, but was not more into it. More than that, I would ride them to go from point A to point B and kind of have like just some fun with it, right? But in 85, when I decided to officially stop racing everything around BMX, I decided that I would do some mountain biking just for the fun of it. So I bought again, at that time, a local mountain bike and just started mountain biking. Now, I come from a place, well, I grew up in a place where mountains were pretty far away, at least an hour to 2 hours drive. So first few years, I couldn't really go at the mountains. So I would go like local trails and local spots here and there where we could actually go trail riding. So I would take my my mountain bike and go ride those trails super locally, right? But the big thing I would do with my mountain bike at that time for about, I'd say, probably 85 to late 90s, maybe 95 or so. So for about 10 years, I rode mountain bikes, but never actually went to a mountain per se with the bike, believe it or not. So I would do local trails, we had the BMX tracks, so I would ride those locally, and I would go everywhere. So I used to live on the south shore of Montreal, and I would like pedal my bike 25, 30 kilometers to go see my friends in Montreal and back and forth. I would do that sometimes 4 or 5 times a day with my bicycle. So that's truly where I really got into, if we could say, the mountain bike industry. So the first few years it came out, I really enjoyed it. But again, we couldn't ride anything anywhere, really. There was not a lot of trails, and specifically the mountains were far away, and I was a kid without a car and stuff. So I couldn't really go to those mountains, right? But it didn't stop me from riding the mountain bikes and having some fun, jumping everything I can, rolling over anything I can, and just enjoy riding a bicycle. And never really got into road cycling and all that. Although I tried them, I would always come back to a mountain bike and kind of enjoy mountain biking as a whole, even though I would be in the street with my friends. I would have BMX or even road bikes and such. So, and one thing led to another. I mean, life catch on. I got some kids and all that. So I would say for about 10 years, from 85 to 95, all I did is just local back and forth, day-to-day riding with my mountain bikes, but nothing fancy. Then I would say late 90s, the whole mountain bike industry has kicked off, and suddenly it was really, really cool to be all over the mountains. Of course, by that time, I was in my 20s. I had my driver's license, and I could actually just take my bike and go wherever I want. So It all started, yeah, when I moved from Canada to California in 97, 98. Worked there for about a year and a half, didn't really bike. Realized after like a year and a half that, you know what, I got no friends. I don't know anybody other than the people I work with. And got to a point where I was like really, really bored. And I was like, you know what? The best way to meet people and get out there is to get a bike and just start shredding. So although I had a bike in California, which I would use to go back and forth to work, but I didn't have like the official hobby of going regularly either to racing or even to the local tracks and just have some fun with the people there. So what I decided to do is I decided to build myself like this insane downhill mountain bike. Called at the time the Super 8, aka the tank of the tanks of the bikes. Those bikes are literally unbreakable. So I decided I would get the most powerful downhill bike I could find, and I would start racing again. So with no real prior experience in the mountains per se, other than a few times here and there, I went at the shop, I bought a bike, piece by piece, brought that back home, built the entire bike over the course of the winter. And first thing after summer, I started racing downhill back in California. Again, I remind you, the only real experience that I had mountain biking was local little trails, cross-country type of trails, more than downhill. A lot of BMX experience, but felt invincible and thought that I could actually be the next world champ. So I went at the store, I bought the baddest bike I could put my hands on. I brought that back home and started building that throughout the winter. So it took me about the winter to get all the parts together and build the bike. By the time spring came, that was probably spring 98 or something like that, I was ready to start racing. So I signed up for all the local bike races on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and started going to those events and started racing downhill. Of course, I came really, really, really quick to the conclusion, to the realization that I am not better than I was at racing than I was when I was a kid. So after a couple of summers of racing downhill, realized it was not for me. I would spend more time crashing my bike and having injuries than actually finishing races and such. So after 2 years, now that I've met pretty much everybody in the industry locally, connected with everybody, decided to just pull out of racing once and for all. So I would say that my last downhill type of racing was probably around 2000, 2001. And after that, what I decided to do is literally just mountain bike for fun until I can no longer mountain bike. So I stopped racing, and I kept in touch with a couple of buddies locally so we could actually go ride every now and then, but without the pressure of racing and all that. So I did end up by accomplishing what I want when I moved to California, was basically get into biking, to meet some new friends and just continue life and see where life brings me. So I raced it for 2 years on the local circuit, had the time of my life. Then decided to just move on from the racing and just let go to that. So then from that point, we're at the beginning of 2000, got married and all that. Super fun, had a blast, probably had a summer where I didn't ride my bike much. But of course I was in California, so surrounded by mountains, would have this desire of going to ride every single day. So one thing led to the other. The following summer, I got really into it and decided that I'll just continue biking as much as I can to kind of release that desire of that adrenaline rush, if you will. So from 2000 to today, we're in 2020. I've been riding my mountain bike almost every single weekend, at least from May to October. I visited a bunch of bike parks I've been riding mostly for the last 20 years with my wife and a handful of very close friends. And the idea is essentially to ride downhill bike at some bike parks, to have the time of our life with no pressure, no questions asked, just ride, just to have some fun. And my wife and I, been doing it for 20 years now and would not go a weekend without riding. So over the years, we had the chance to actually visit a bunch of bike parks. So that's where I would say the last 20 years is where I put a lot of energy when it comes down to mountain biking. So my goal is to essentially visit as many bike parks as I can. Of course, when I first started 20 years ago, there was only a handful of bike parks. So that went by pretty quick. But as time progressed, there's more and more bike parks nowadays. And I would say for the last 20 years, I probably visited around 10 to 15 bike parks, like completely different, and went enough to say that we know about the trails, how it actually works, and have a blast, and really had the chance to meet a lot of people and a lot of really good people throughout the years. So I think that overall, although I'm not racing anymore, the fact that I went all into mountain biking 20 years ago and never looked back, by the way. I did a little bit of road, a little bit of BMX, a little bit of other stuff, but always come back to the mountain bike. So as I was saying, over the years, my wife and I ended up by going to a lot of bike parks and meeting a lot of people that are, passionate about mountain biking. And just never stopped mountain biking. So we're the type of people now that go to mountain biking around 30 to 40 times a year, like throughout the season. That's bike park only. So, and that does not include me going out like other little mountains with some buddies and go ride some of the local trails. So it doesn't include any of that. But usually for the bike parks, I'll go out 30 to 40 times a season. So that's like how I really got into it. I gotta say, it's been quite the adventure over the years. Like I said, I've been, off-roading since 1977 or so. I had some ups and downs, some cool and some less cool adventures. But I would not have it any different. Now that I think about my cycling career and everything that I did around that, I mean, I would not go back into any of the previous cycling that I was doing. I was really made for mountain biking, and I think I fell into it when I was a kid. And just talking about it right now, as you know, there's like a bunch of bikes behind me, and I mean, I have to contain myself to not just jump on one and go shred. That's how bad it is now into my blood. And that's how I pretty much got into it, was through racing, and started with off-road and worked my way there. And one thing led to another, like the whole idea of the mountain bikes and all that. And got myself one and shred and go back. Never look back. So that's how I got into it. And now I could say, oh my God, I've been like consistently riding downhill specific mountain biking for the last 20 years or more. At least we're in 2020. So let's say we go back 1999, 98, 99. So about 22 years of pure downhill almost every weekend from May to October, and just love it. So as I was saying, for the last 20 years, I've been purely downhilling, mostly in bike parks, 30 to 40 times a season. Been fortunate enough to get my wife into cycling, and over time, I ended up by having a handful of very close friends that are into downhill as well. So the idea for the last 10 years or so has been to teach my wife how to be able to shred and actually follow us. And us meaning like being able to ride all day with me and my buddies and kind of like still being able to shred and not being tired and being able to follow, not necessarily at the same speed and such. But nowadays, I mean, she's able to ride with us all day and safely have her own fun, which is awesome. So that's been very, very cool for the last 10, 15 years that I've been, riding with my wife and teaching her all that stuff. Everything that I know around cycling, communicating that back to my wife and getting her to shred with us. So now what's next? We're in 2020. Of course, with everything that's been going on with the pandemic and everything, there's a few things that has changed when it comes down to our mountain bike activities. First of all, the past year, most of the bike parks have been closed or open very, very for a short time. So we haven't been riding much, but we did manage to go ride a couple places. But one of the things that my wife and I are planning to do on the next 5 to 7 years is we want to essentially go around the world and visit all the World Cup mountain bike parks. So that's kind of like our next step into our mountain bike journey is going to be go around the world and visit those different bike parks. Now, of course, with the pandemic and everything, it did change something. We were supposed to have go to one of those mountains this summer, which obviously we didn't go due to the pandemic. But hopefully by 2021, next summer, we'll be able to plan for next winter, probably a trip in New Zealand or something like that. But basically that would be the idea for us. And that would be the next step for me is to really go and visit some of those places around the world because I've been following those mountains and those races for many, many years and said one day before I pass away, I'd love to go visit those bike parks and actually ride and shred those trails. So it is in our plans for the next few years. So stay tuned for some of that. Of course, whenever we start doing that and we could travel and everything is safe for everybody, we're going to plan our first trip. And of course, I'm going to bring that to you guys and we're going to be able to share that with you. So that's my mountain bike journey as a whole. Started that as a kid, 77, started the off-road biking and never looked back and enjoy every single minute of it. And hopefully if you remember one thing from this video is you should, if you don't shred, you should take a bicycle today, get on a saddle and start pedaling. This is probably the coolest thing you'll ever do in your life. Oh, which reminds me, you know what? Now that I think about it, every time that I get on a bicycle, I smile. And I'm happy as whatever, okay? To not say as fuck. And you know what? It is like that for everybody that we get on a bicycle for the first time. They start smiling, and before you know it, they're the happiest people you could meet. So you're looking for a sport to be happy? Get on some pedals, sit on a saddle and start pedaling and see the world in a different way. It's actually pretty cool. And if you ever have the chance to start mountain biking very, very precisely, and you want to go in mountains and do some cross country and some downhill, again, it's probably the most satisfying thing you're going to come across in your lifetime. It's pretty particular. But I cannot express how cool it is if you don't take your bike and you don't jump on the pedals and your saddle and go try it out for yourself. You're going to realize how cool this sport can be. And also very, very addicted. So that's probably why I just can't get enough. And even though it's the winter and I can't ride my bike, I'm sitting around bikes and I'm doing a video about bikes because it's in my DNA and I cannot have enough. So I hope you guys found some value into this video. It would mean the world to me if you would leave me your comments. And if you do like my videos, please subscribe, like, and comment. That would be awesome. And even though you don't like these videos, do tell me. This content is for you, not for me. So if you tell me what you like, I'll do some more. If you tell me what you don't like, I'll do less. So please Feel free to go in the comments below and tell me your comments and what you think about these videos. And I will see you in the next video if I don't see you on a trail before that. Happy shredding. See you guys.